Welcome everybody, and welcome to Envision 360's webinar. We're focusing today on shaping the future of EHCPs and exploring the potential benefits, challenges of EHCP templates, whether they be regional, national, in comparison or contrast to the current localized model of working. So this is our fourth webinar now, the fourth in our series. So we started over a year ago. How these webinars work, for those of you who it's the first time, we tend to do sort of bite-size sessions, deliveries. So you'll hear from three speakers today, and I'll introduce the speakers in a moment. We'll have roughly 10-minute delivery sessions. During those 10 minutes, feel free to pop questions into the chat. Use the chat function. And if you like a question somebody's posted, or you would like to hear the answer to that one, if you use the little thumbs up icon, we can then start to prioritize the questions. Those with the most sort of interest, we will put those first for the Q&A. So there'll be, each presenter will deliver 10 minutes. Then there'll be a 5-minute Q&A for that individual where you guys can ask as much, any comments, queries, questions. We'll move through the three speakers. So in total, it'll be around 30 minutes delivery, 15 minutes Q&A. There's an interactive component to the session later where you can use your phone or your laptop to engage, and you'll see some of those results coming up on screen. We've had fantastic feedback from the first three webinars that have been delivered, and we're confident that today's will be just as insightful, informative, and productive for you guys. So a big welcome and thank you for giving up your time this afternoon to be with us here. It's likely you'll get a little bit of time left. We always leave a little bit of flex in these sessions. So although it's 90 minutes, it's likely we'll be finished before that as well. We do record the sessions and we will be able to send that for everybody who attends today. You'll get a link to the recording, the slides that were delivered, but also a collation of the feedback, because we will be sharing a link towards the end of the session for an opportunity to talk a little bit about, or to share your views on what you enjoyed, how we can improve, and what topics should we focus on in the future. So you'll see the quote on screen, and that's the essence of these webinars. Collaborative learning in SEND isn't just about sharing what we know, it's about weaving together our collective experiences to strengthen our practice and create meaningful change in the lives of children and young people. So we've set up these webinars over a year ago to try and promote and advocate more knowledge sharing in the sector. And we've had a range of sessions that have covered all manner of things, SEND and inclusion across the sector. So moving on to today, the agenda for this afternoon. Okay, we've got two fabulous speakers, in Andre and Abigail, and as they come to their session, I'll give you a little bit more intel and information about their wealth of experience and what they bring to today's session. And for the first time in these webinar sessions, Envision 360, myself, will spend a little bit of time as well. I'll have a 10-minute session towards the end. That'll be the first time. Typically, it's always external speakers and that knowledge sharing, but today's topic is quite pertinent to some of the progress and the journey we're on at Envision 360, and we'd love to share that with you. Why did we focus on EHCP templates and the potential benefits of regional and national? Following the last session, hopefully, Lydia, give me a thumbs up somewhere if you can see the feedback graph on screen. So that feedback graph is, we gave a range of options, said, what would you like to focus on in this webinar today? And it was quite clear that the EHCP template was an agenda item that people wanted to hear more about. It was clearly our front runner. And so we planned a session today that hopefully everybody will find super helpful and super informative. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to try and make that slide bigger. Oh, a little bit of background on who we are. Apologies, I was about to intro Andre then, but very quickly, Envision 360, we're your facilitators. We have been putting on these webinars. We have been working in the sector as individuals for more than 20 years in local authority centered inclusion, teaching background. Personally, I was an educational psychologist as well, head of inclusion services in local authority. But for the last 5 years, we've been growing, and we founded Envision 360. And we've been working in the quality assurance and the audit section of the SEND sector regarding education, health and care plans. We've got more than 50 local authorities who commission software to quality assure their EHCPs. There's lots of validation out there from local authorities, the improvement journey they've been on, Ofsted and CQC. And we feel we're well placed in the sector to start connecting partners, introducing knowledge sharing exercises within the sector. And we feel really positive about the journey we've been on, but more so about the journey where we're still at the infancy on. There's lots of exciting progress, and we'll share some of that with you. But we are committed to sharing knowledge in the sector, and there will be more of these webinars coming soon. So at this point, I'm going to introduce our first speakers today, and that is Dr. Andre Imich, OBE. So Andre's held the position of DFE SEN and Disability Advisor for over 14 years. This involved Andre providing advice to ministers and DFE policy leads across the department on all matters relating to identification, support and improving outcomes for children and young people with SEND. He's worked closely with local authorities, parent care groups, voluntary sector, health and schools and colleges to achieve their goals, and in 2022 was awarded an OBE for services to children and young people. And prior to this position, Andre held a range of SEND leadership and professional posts in the national strategies and local government, and has been an EP and a primary and secondary school teacher. So Andre's session will consider locally produced EHCP templates. How did we get to where we are today? What issues do these templates raise? And what might be the benefits to change into a more common format? Andre, over to you.
Thank you, Phil, for that extensive introduction, and hello to everyone today. If you go to the next slide, Phil. And the next slide. Yeah, I think it's always interesting to go back to how are we where we are today? Where did it all come from? Because the current EHC template was only introduced the current EHCP approach was only introduced 11 years ago. Prior to that, really since 1981 and reinforced in the 1996 Education Act, there was a single template for every statement of special educational needs. So the latest or the last regulation, the last statutory underpinning of that was in 1996. But there had been a template for a statement since 1981, since the 81 Act introduced statements to England. So we had a single national template, and we had that right up to 2014. If you want to find it, if you've got an old code of practice, I think the last one was it 2004, 2003? The one prior to the 2014 reforms. But it was there at the back of the code, 3 sides, the template for a statement of special educational needs. And local authorities had to follow that template. They could not veer from it. And actually, all statements looked very similar. There were concerns, there were criticisms of statements, but it certainly wasn't about the format. It was more about the content. And of course, our good friend specificity and quantification was a concern all those years ago, as it is now. But it also was a very tight template. I mean, I remember as a sort of senior leader in a local authority around 2002, 2003, we were all very excited by the Every Child Matters agenda, trying to sort of adjust our everyday practice to accommodate the 5 outcomes. But we in my authority played around with the statement format to try to amend it to accommodate those 5 Every Child Matters outcomes. But we sought advice from the Department for Education, and were clearly told, no, you can't do that. It's a statutory template. You cannot veer from it. You cannot add bits to it and so on, which was actually disappointing, we felt, because Every Child Matters was meant to be a multi-agency approach and so on, and we felt that the statutory document ought to be able to be robust enough to change, but we couldn't. So again, that was a limitation, but it did mean that all statements had the same headings in the same format. In the run-up to the 2014 Children and Families Act, of course, many of you will remember, we had pathfinders, and each of the 20 pathfinders at the time was asked to trial new ways of writing statutory documents. We were all playing around with that concept of co-production at the time and getting a much stronger focus on outcomes, becoming more child-centered, etc., etc. So the local areas involved in the Pathfinder program were enabled to produce trial ways of producing statutory information for what ended up as being education, health and care plans. And there was an evaluation of that. And ultimately, the evaluation really took account of the views of local authorities at the time and of their health and social care partners and of parents. Where it didn't take probably enough views of, it didn't take really at all, was a school perspective on what they felt about those plans. And of course, one of the big issues today is those schools that have plans from more than one authority. But ultimately, the Pathfinder work, which was evaluated, concluded that actually having local area developed templates and plans were more responsive to local needs and circumstances. And therefore, the legislation ended up without a single template. It was evidence-based at the time. It was by and large the work of the Pathfinders who felt that being able to develop their own local templates in co-production with parent representatives, etc., was a more responsive and appropriate way to reflect the way that they worked locally. So that's the way the Children and Families Act ended up, without a single template, just general regulations which could be translated as local authorities judged appropriate for their templates. Next slide, please. So I think it's important to understand that. But clearly, over a decade now, we've had this new template for over a decade. I reckon in England, we've had at least 1 million EHC plans produced. Obviously, we've got about 680,000 at the moment, but there will have been quite a number that have ended because the child has left the system. So we've had at least 1 million EHC plans to learn from. And we know that each local authority has a very different format. It's very difficult to find two that are even closely similar. Different sizes, different lengths, different shapes, all sorts of differences. Probably the differences are visually more pronounced than you might imagine. And some of the issues that we come across and are often pointed out in all sorts of research is that some of them miss out complete sections. They don't have a section G, for example, for some reason. Some of them use the letters required by the code, but the content doesn't match what the wording of the code says. So letters and contents don't always align with each other. Putting sections together, and you'll often see those sections particularly joined up as a table. Having a table is permissible according to the code, but they're not properly labeled, or once you get underneath the heading, it doesn't actually say what it says on the box, as it were. Some plans that I've seen have put in an additional section. So which again is not a requirement and is generally seen as a not good practice. So there's often additional sections on resourcing and funding, which isn't referenced in the code, but is often seen by many as a substitute for specified and quantified provision in section F. So then there are issues, and as ever, there's a lack of specificity and quantification in those provision sections. Now, that's not necessarily a direct result of the template itself, because that's an issue that can happen, and certainly did happen back in the days of a single template for a statement of special educational needs. But having a single template might reduce that likelihood of that lack of specificity and quantification, or increase the likelihood of it, certainly promote it, particularly if a single template has exemplars attached to it. Next slide. Some of the sort of responses to the Green Paper. In the Green Paper, the department flagged up issues around the possibility of a single template. That got, probably of all the proposals in that Green Paper of 2022, that proposal probably got the most agreement across all the sectors. And that's quite something in the world of special educational needs, to get a high degree of convergence on any proposed change. And so there was certainly almost universal agreement that we needed a single template across the country. And the DfE's improvement plan of a couple of years ago said that we will work with stakeholders to deliver a standard template with supporting processes and guidance from 2025. Well, we're getting to the end of 2025. Whether we'll get that, we don't know. We're certainly waiting, aren't we, for this white paper, and who knows what it might say about the single standardized template. But they did say also that we would start work on a national template supported by guidance in partnership with relevant bodies, parents, children and young people. Well, that's certainly been happening in the change programme. The change programme local areas were provided with a national template and have been trialling that for probably about 15 to 18 months. And certainly some local areas have used it for all their new EHC plans. And it was also a commitment in the improvement plan to encourage local authorities to adopt the single template and consider the case for mandating its use through legislation. So the department's looking at whether encouragement is what's needed going forward to adopt a single template, or whether one has to actually legislate for that to happen. So that's the sort of ideas for change. Next slide, Phil. So what would be the benefits of a single template? Well, I think that undoubtedly be increased clarity and consistency. When one looks at plans, and I think I've seen plans from so many different local areas, having a single template, I think, would help capture the same basic and essential information and make them much easier for people to understand. You know what's coming up. It would reduce confusion, reduce ambiguity, and it would be a much more streamlined process. I think people would become much more familiar with it. When a child moves between local authorities, a standardised plan would make it much easier for that new local area to understand the child's needs and the support they require. And many of you in today's session, I know, work in local authorities, and I'm sure that when you have a new child move in, you look at their education, health and care plan, and you think, crumbs, this is quite different from how we do it. And it's going to take me a little while to get underneath this to understand what it's aiming to achieve, what the provision is that it's actually describing, and so on. So I think that it will make that portability and continuity an issue. This is an issue for families who move across the country, but it also is in a way the same sort of issue that schools face. A single school receiving plans from even just more than one authority, even receiving from two authorities, it's quite a skill to get inside a template, inside a different way of presenting similarly required information. And for some schools, that's a challenge. And the more local authorities that a school is receiving children from with plans, the harder that is. Improved communication and collaboration. I do think it would facilitate better communication and collaboration between the agencies that have similar approaches. And of course, some of the agencies are working cross local authority. We see that with ICBs, for example, and many of the health professionals in particular are working in different local authorities. So I think it brings about a much more common language, and again, much easier ways of accessing the expectations in a plan. Next slide. It would reduce the administrative burden associated with plans. I think just having a single template, getting to know your way around it, knowing that that's the way it's done everywhere would, I do believe, be a big benefit to a single template. A more collaborative and less adversarial system. Again, it's surprising how much conflict is generated by the nature of the way you have written your plan. It focuses on problems that don't need to be there, and I think it also, and my final bullet partly reflects this, the credibility of the local authority. If the local authority can't write a template, doesn't produce a plan that's in line with the sections in the code of practice, it undermines the credibility of the local authority in being able to follow the code of practice in terms of producing a plan, and therefore it increases the argument that, well, if they can't produce that plan in line with the code of practice, have they actually been able to identify needs and provision well? And I think to have a single template protects the local authority's credibility. It also would streamline the EHC plan process. Some of the EHC plans are so long and have so many columns, it's inevitably a very big time consumer. So I do think having a single template will reduce the time and resources required to produce plans. I'm looking at Sally's query. Would a single template help with having an unequal amount of provision? There are issues there, and I think it would certainly help to standardize the wording of provision. I'm sure about that. But also, it's interesting that I've heard, you get, for example, under one section, so, there are 4 needs identified under cognition and learning. But I do hear from the tribunal that they, in section F, every time speech and language therapy, for example, I'm just using that as an example, is referenced in relation to a need, the next time it's repeated, they see it as cumulative, whereas the local authority has written it twice, but intended the same level of provision to be made for that particular need to be met. And so there are those sort of complex issues that I think would be resolved more easily by having a single template. And I do think that point you're making, Sally, about ordinarily available provision, I do think that any guidance attached to a single template does need to spell out how much an EHC plan should include ordinarily available provision or not include ordinarily available provision. An EHC plan is intended to describe provision that is not normally available. So I think those sort of clarities in both the way that the template is produced and the way that any associated guidance is produced would be helpful to local areas. If we could go on to the next slide. and I think this is my final slide, there's no doubt that EHC plans are hard to write. Some are not very well written, but that in part reflects the very real starting challenge. They're hard to write. I keep saying to people trying to write outcomes, think about your own annual reviews of your performance reviews of staff. How well do people write outcomes that can be measured the following year for their staff? And I think that's an interesting example, which shows the challenge of writing outcomes for plans as well as writing EHC plans. So I do think they're hard to write. So we do need to make sure that if there is a single template, there is clear guidance that goes well beyond what is currently available in the code, that there are exemplars of good practice, and that's, believe you me, that's quite hard to produce. And of course, there needs to be training and support, particularly for local area caseworkers who face challenges in terms of producing plans. We must always remember that having an EHC plan template is not necessarily a panacea in itself. It does not solve the problem that an EHC plan can only ever be as good as the advice received during the assessment. It can be worse. It can be a bad plan despite good advice, but it can only be good if it gets good quality advice received during the assessment. So maybe we should also be advocating for templates for professional information and advice, and a requirement that the professionals involved actually follow the template. So I think there are issues there about the advice received. We must make sure that that is standardized in the same way that we are expecting plans to be. Advice and information needs to be written with the template, with the EHC plan in mind, what the requirements are. The guidance in the code of practice is very limited in terms of what the advice and information should be saying. And of course, we need to be aware of the biggest pitfall of all. You know, if we introduce a single template nationally, we need to be very, very cautious about any expectations of any expectations of current plans, how they might move forward to a new template. We absolutely need to avoid a repeat of that process that many of you will have lived through of converting from statements to plans. That is something we absolutely need to avoid. So that's a big challenge. But we need to make sure, whenever I've talked in my role as DFE about the move to a single template, it's always welcomed. But of course, it's always welcomed with a sort of people also holding in their breath, as long as it's the one we've got, because of course that change is quite a challenge. So, final slide, I think, is that the benefits of a single template far outweigh the drawbacks. Undoubtedly, it would be very beneficial to the system as a whole to have a single template. It would move the discussion to probably more meaningful and useful areas of the system. If the department decides to move away from a locally produced template, as we have now, I can see absolutely zero benefits in the department producing 9 regional templates. There's a single legislation, there's going to be a single code of practice. It might change, but it will still be a single code of practice. I cannot see one benefit in having a regional template if the department moves away from allowing local areas degrees of freedom. If the department decides to continue with local flexibility in producing templates, there could be some benefits in regions deciding to produce their own regional template. But I think those benefits are limited. They might be beneficial to a degree, but that would be for a local area and local regions to decide. So I think the government itself would be thinking, do we want to have a single template for the country, or do we want to have 153 local areas making their own judgments about templates? That's, I think my next slide is questions. I'm looking at the at the ones here, Phil. So I'll pick up a
Yeah, that'd be
few
great,
if we've got
Andre, if we
time.
start with those. Absolutely.
Tina, what are your thoughts on a standardized template primarily written by AI? Um, I'm going to, I'm not going to say too much about that. I suspect Phil might want to say something a bit later about that. I would certainly start by saying, whatever way it goes, it has to be informed by good quality advice and information, and it also would need a human touch. Okay, I won't say any more because I know that Phil will want to address that later. Emma, a single guide about what would be normally available would be useful too. This shouldn't vary between boroughs. It's a very strong point, Emma. We're getting that sort of message, aren't we, at the moment from the Children's Commissioner report, the Education Select Committee that was published, was it earlier this week or late last week, about being much clearer about what is expected to be delivered in schools, etc. So that your wish may come true. Certainly, would you all agree that it shouldn't vary between boroughs, but the starting points between boroughs and local authorities is so different that it's sort of leveling up is going to be quite challenging. How will the new template help in terms of inclusion of preparing for adulthood? Hannah, that's an excellent question, and certainly the change program local areas I know have been talking about that challenge in relation to the single template that they were asked to use. And I think there was a view amongst many of those local areas that the single template needed some adjustment in order to accommodate the hopes of preparing for adulthood. How that shakes down, I don't know, because there will be an evaluation of the work of the change program. Templates for advice would be very useful. Absolutely agree, Emma. Would a national EHC plan template mean a new EHC annual review template? At the moment, Sally, there is no template for any annual review unless a local authority has devised its own. So that will be down to where you are, that the local authority has devised its own annual review, which is totally understandable. Whether the department would go as far as annual review templates, I don't know. But if it's a local area that's doing it, then work with them to make sure that anything they're amending is less complex and less messy, would be my advice. What is the view of parent carers and young people? That's a very good question, Lucy. And again, I know that local areas have been involved over time with amending their templates, using their parent carer forums and other forums for feedback on proposed changes. So certainly they've got views. My feeling is that they also, judging from the feedback that the department received on the green paper, the views of parents were in line with professionals, local authorities, etc., that a single template would be helpful, particularly those families who have moved from one local authority to another. Okay, and
Thank you,
I
Andre.
will close there. Thank you.
Andre, can I just say thanks again, having your wealth of expertise and your insight to the Change Partner Programme and everything that's gone before with the reforms helps give the context to this and the necessary depth to it as well. So a fantastic presentation, and the questions were really pertinent. So I'm sure everybody's got a lot from that. So thank you, Andre. Like we said, we will be sharing out the recording as well if you missed any of that or you wanted to share it with colleagues who you know would find that useful. Okay, we're going to move on to our next speaker. And today we're delighted to have Abigail Hawkins with us. Abigail, I've known for some time. Abigail has worked in education for more than 3 decades now, both as a teacher, Senko, absolutely recognised as an expert on provision mapping and SEND practice, and is a wealth of experience supporting schools nationally to improve their systems, strategic level, but also outcomes for children and young people. She is the founder of Sensible Senko and Senko Solutions, which has a huge reach nationally, combining practical knowledge and strategic insight, helping leaders, teachers, families navigate the complex world of SEND. So again, on today's theme, Abigail's presentation is going to look at the potential benefits and challenges, drawing from sort of practical experience from that Senko role as well, and her constant engagement with the Senko community, and look at the structure and the difficulties that different formats potentially could provide schools and Senkos to make those EHCPs a live, living document rather than something that is filed on a laptop or a server somewhere. And we'll look at how a common framework could potentially transform some of this arena. So Abigail, you're going to take over sharing screen now, and I'm going to pass over to you for your talk. So thank you, Abigail.
Thank you very much, Phil. Hopefully my screen is sharing with everybody. Everybody's just appeared off that screen, so I think it's working.
It's looking good.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so I am not at the wonderful advisory level of Andre. I'm very jealous. I am a Senko on the ground, and I always have been. So this is my perspective of why I think a standardised EHCP template would be absolutely amazing. I love my job because I get to go into schools up and down the country. Last week, I was in 3 different schools in 3 different areas, and it always amazes me how different things are from, you know, funding processes and all the rest of it, but even something that is statutory like the EHCP, and I'm being shown one about a student and I'm having to stare at it for 10 minutes to try and work out where section F is, because sometimes it isn't labelled clearly. And actually I find it quite frustrating. But I imagine many Senkos who sit on the border of multiple local authorities, and I sit on the border of 6, must find it really difficult to work out where's that piece of information, and oh, I know where I'm going for that bit. Oh, no, I don't, because it's somewhere else on that one. It's really, really tricky. So I just wanted to look at it from the Senko perspective for you. I've really liked when Andre was showing you his slide about the benefits of a single template, because he actually used quite a few of the words I've got on these slides here about clarity, and he didn't use the word equity, but he used consistency. He used the word efficiency in there as well, and the administrative burden. So when we're talking about an EHCP, we're talking about the people that have to use that. So yes, okay, I'm coming at it from the Senko perspective. We're turning it into something that is used in schools to deliver the education for our students. But actually, we've got parents who also need to navigate that EHCP. We've got professionals who need to work their way through it. And if we could take away, it's called that extraneous load, isn't it, when we're talking about cognition and learning? If we could take away some of that additional burden so that everybody knows, oh, when I open it, page 1 is always going to have this piece of information here. And if I want to go and find this, it's always going to be on this page. It would make everybody's life so much simpler, and it makes it so much easier to quality assure and check it and see, is that bit missing, or does that bit need a bit more information in it? Preferably not written by AI though. So, you know, I'm a practicing Senko. We write, we do quality assure those EHCPs. We're not permitted to change them because it's a legal document, so that should be going back to the local authority, but we are giving our professional feedback on that. We're working with them daily. It's operational for us. It's not that strategic side of it, it's the operational side of it. And it's yeah, I'm going to start ranting in a moment. We need something consistent. We need a consistent structure because we need that clarity for our families, for ourselves, for our schools, to make sure that everybody is able to follow what is in that EHCP. And effectively what that will do is boost the efficiency for schools, for services, and ultimately for our students. Equity sitting in there because we've got that consistent quality across local areas. I I say I sit on the board of 6 local authorities. I've got one where I might as well write the EHCP on the back of a napkin, and probably a soggy napkin at that. And I've got others where it is so amazingly written, but it's about 380 pages long and I can't find my way through it, or it is a bit too detailed, is probably where I'm going there. And then that efficiency, because I want to spend less time on admin. I want to spend less time hunting and reading through things and actually supporting students. And that's the same when I'm showing the EHCP with the teachers in my school. I want them to be able to instantly pick out what it is that should be in place. What is the target? Why does that target exist? How am I going to meet that target? What provisions are supposed to be there? I don't want them to be spending 10 minutes hunting through it, trying to find it. I've put here the Senko's daily reality. Like I say, I am a Senko at heart. I've been there for too many years. We're juggling so much all of the time. We've got those assessments that are going on. We've got our provision mapping. We've got our reviews. We've got timetables. You've probably just had a notification from your local authority to say get your funding bids in 2 days' time. You've got consultations you're trying to respond to. And you know, if we just take consultations alone, trying to respond to those when they're coming to us in so many different formats makes life really difficult. And I know on Andre's slide, he wrote about EHCPs are different shapes and lengths. I've got that same sentence in here. We're both seeing the same thing, and it's frustrating, very frustrating. Some of them miss the crucial elements, whole sections missing, or they're in a strange place, or it's repeated. So I've seen the same piece of information 6 times across a document, and I'm thinking, why is that there? And then the 7th time it's written differently, and you're thinking, is that something different, or is it actually the same thing? We've got, as I'll just say, 154 different formats, and I feel like it's more than that sometimes. They use different terminology in there. So the use of ordinarily available provision, yes, okay, we don't have a statutory definition of what that should be at the moment, but even within schools, it is used differently, and within local authorities, it is used differently. I was having a conversation with somebody about cluster funding yesterday. So locality funding, cluster funding, those models. And we were talking about it, and we realised that actually we both have a very different understanding of what that actually means. That actually means that when I am a Senko and I move from one local authority to another, I've got to learn a whole new vocabulary that goes with things. So it isn't just about the template, it's about the language, the terminology and the vocabulary that we're using alongside that as well. Lots of our EHCPs have a variable quality. I say some are very comprehensive and clear, and others are, what's the word? Woolly. A little bit woolly, a little bit soggy, a little bit lacking in logical structure. Kind of makes you wonder where they were written. And actually at that point, I do wonder if AI could do a better job of it, if I'm perfectly honest. It might at least stick it in an order that we could make sense with. We're spending too much time deciphering it and picking the bits out, and that just slows everything down. I call it the patchwork problem. Say 3 different local authorities last week, 3 entirely different plans. The Children's and Families Act was not incredibly clear about what it should look like. We've got those headings, but it didn't dictate it. And I think Andre did a fantastic history lesson for us there. I learned a couple of things that I'd kind of forgotten, and I'm from the era of good old Section 323s. The implementation, though, of what is currently sitting in that code of practice just looks so different everywhere that it is quite scary, if I'm honest. If I just slow down, take a breath for a second, it is actually quite scary that if I went to 2 different local authorities with the same information on the same child, the resulting EHC plan could be entirely different. and it shouldn't be. It should be whoever gets that information should be able to create it in the format that is standardized, that we know what their needs are, and this is what is needed to meet their needs, and here it is, here it is presented to you in a format we understand. But we know that that is not what is happening, and I'm guessing the majority of you on this call are dealing with EHCs on a daily basis and understand that. Some of the plans are easy to read. Some of them, it's like wading through treacle. So we're trying to unpick. I love things written in bullet points because I can pick out what's the key bullet point here, what's the thing I'm actually supposed to be doing, rather than reading the wool and the fluff that sits around some things. And a student moves from one local authority to another, as can happen either at phase transfer or because a family moves house. It would be so much easier if we'd got a similar format to transfer that information, because that's easier for the families to understand. They're able to go, oh, that's on page 16, or that's in this section here, and everybody knows what we're talking about. Standardization doesn't mean identical, though. I just want to make that clear. It doesn't mean that we're going to use a copy and a paste. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to use AI to write everything for us. I love AI. AI, for me, it takes away some of those difficult tasks. It gets me started on things, but it isn't there to replace my professional knowledge. I have still got to go in there and check and make sure that it is correct and make sure that it truly reflects things. And I can't just copy and paste from one EHC to another. And I have seen that. I remember when we were converting between 2014 to 2018, the old statements into EHCs, and somebody had gone, oh yeah, both those children have got autism, we'll just copy and paste from that one there to that one there. And you could tell because they forgot to change the name at the same time. It was very frustrating. What it does mean, though, is we've got a consistent logical skeleton to work with. So common sections, the needs, the outcome, the provision, who's going to be responsible, the quantification sitting in there, the review arrangements in a familiar order, preferably not muddling section E and section F together, or if we are, everybody is muddling section E and F together. Consistent headings sitting in there as well would be nice. A shared language, so I said it a moment ago, but common definitions, common terminology that everybody understands. Doesn't matter whether you're up in North Tyneside or down in South London, that we've got the same language so that we're not misinterpreting things and we're not getting confused. And then I've called it interoperable data there. So fields that are both have clarity, but also structure, so that we can integrate those with other systems like a Vision 360, but systems like your school MIS and systems like health and social care, because it frustrates me that we have all this information about children, and when a parent goes to a meeting, they are having to repeat the information so many times to so many different people, when actually we could have it on the same format. I remember the old CAF framework when it came out, and I was quite excited by that until somebody decided, I'll add a box here, I'll delete that box there, we'll use it for this, we'll use it for that. And it became something, it became a beast in its own right. It became something entirely different, 154 different versions of that, if not more. So I just think those three things, standardization to me, the common sections, a shared language, and that interoperable data, so that we can share data between different systems safely, of course, and within GDPR and data protection. I think it would also help transform that family experience. We know that families are frustrated with systems at the moment. We know that they're frustrated with the whole process of things. I think it should be about supporting our families as much as it is about supporting ourselves within schools. So enhanced clarity. They don't need to be a document specialist. We have to recognise that some of our parents have needs themselves, and those documents are not the easiest thing to read at the best of times. So making it as simple as possible for them. A shared template allows them to recognise that, to see the outcomes, to see the provisions, and they're not having to hunt through things. We've got that seamless portability. So when we're moving from phase transfer one place to another, or across local authorities, or if they're moving house, the staff in the new settings can navigate it because it's familiar. We know what it actually looks like. We haven't got a new learning curve for every piece of paper that we look at. I kind of think of it a little bit like a lesson plan. We don't have in schools, we generally have the same lesson plan that we all use, not 15 different formats. It would be nice to have that, and nice that we're not getting the EHC and that the Senko is then having to spend 2 or 3 hours translating into I'm going to call them an IEP, whatever terminology you want to use for that, but you all know what I mean when I say an IEP. We're not having the Senko sitting there trying to translate it into the school version of the IEP, just so that everybody has got the same format for them. And then I think it builds trust. Consistency definitely builds trust across those systems. It makes it fair, it makes it transparent, and it makes it comparable, and reduces that, I'm going to call it the postcode lottery, that difference that you have between the different things. I'm just reading the comment that somebody wrote about families demanding every word from the assessment being included, even if it's ordinarily available provision. You're absolutely right. I think that's because they're scared that it's not going to happen if it's not in the plan. But maybe that's a section within the plan. Maybe we need the section that says this will be ordinarily available provision, rather than it being mixed into the legal provision that makes it the EHCP. So we can still, as I said, we can still have the box. That's why the whole template needs to be looked at, but it's clearly identified as this is ordinarily available. This is what your kid's going to get anyway, regardless of whether we write it in here. My opinion. I've put there from chaos to clarity. So from a Senko workflow perspective, that common layout would really help us. We've got quicker briefings. We can tell staff where to find things. It helps us with that provision mapping. It helps us to link the outcomes to the provisions and then the success measures. And provision mapping's my baby. It's you know, where I've spent most of my last 15 years working with it, and I love doing provision mapping. But to be fair, every school does it differently, and it doesn't always have to be done the same way, but it's what works for the school. And unless they've got a way of extracting from things what that provision should be, it becomes very, very difficult. Stronger reviews, because if you haven't got clear information, you can't have a strong review, you can't measure the impact. And then streamlined training as well that goes with that, because new staff get to learn one system, not dozens of systems. Whether you're a new Senko, a new teacher, a new caseworker in the local authority, it doesn't matter. We want streamlined training so that everybody gets the same. And actually, I think everybody should have the same training, from your caseworkers to your Senkos to your teachers, so that we're all singing from the same EHCP or hymn sheet, whatever saying we want to use. I think system-wide, we've got benefits for our local authorities and their partners as well. So that enhanced quality assurance, and that's how I met Phil in the first place from Envision 360. We were talking about quality assurance of EHCPs. But your local authorities can quality assure things a little more reliably. They're able to go back to their caseworkers and say, look, this one is not correct. They're able to challenge it, whereas at the moment, I don't think they are. They don't necessarily have all of that information. A minimum content standard sitting in there as well, not leaving sections blank. If the section doesn't need something in it, fair enough, but there should be a statement to say this section does not require completing, or a tick box to say, yeah, we've filled this section in, but there isn't anything for it, rather than it literally left blank and then discovering later on that actually it should have been filled in, but somebody forgot to go back and do it. We can get some meaningful benchmarking going on as well, because then we can start to measure across cohorts, across local authorities. We can start looking at what is going into section F for cognition and learning across the country. We can start seeing those patterns and trends, and then maybe government is able to look at it and go, actually, we've got an increase in this here, and we perhaps need to put more funding here, or we need to direct this to happen instead. Fairer resource decisions I've put there. I'm not even going to start talking about funding because that's an entirely different conversation. But resources within schools are finite and we are struggling for them. So we need a way of being able to determine how much funding we need for things, how many resources we need for something, because it's not always funding, it is sometimes a resource. And then I've put there scalable training, so scaling up from our new caseworkers and our Senkos to everybody that actually needs that. And I've put down at the bottom there that disagreements usually focus on the substance rather than the layout, but it's what's in there as much as where we put it that's really important. I have got a slide here on digital revolution. Anybody who knows me knows I love my technology and I love my AI. I'm never going to back away from it. My slides were produced by AI, and thank you, AI, for getting the spellings right on the images for once. But I think it's important to recognise that we don't just mean AI by this. We mean the use of digital systems. So very often what a school is doing is they're pulling the information from an EHC, you're putting it into your MIS, which is your management information system within schools, whether that's SIMS or Arbor or Bromcom, whichever one it is you're using. You're putting it into timetables, you're putting it into provision maps, you're recreating it as an IEP. But we need something that allows us to do that quickly and easily, and that we're not just manually retyping everything out or doing, copy paste is great, but you've still actually got to sit there and do a copy paste. So if we can have a standardized template, companies that work with us are able to use your connection systems, and I'm going to say WAND here because the majority of you will know who I mean by WAND. They're able to use that to link those systems together. So that data field that says E3 on one document feeds across to this data field that says F64 on another one. So we're able to pull the information into the places that we want, but we can only do that if we've got standard templates that we're working from. When they become a whole variety of different templates, everybody ends up duplicating their work, redoing things, or manually typing it and finding workaround solutions. I put there API ready, so APIs are external links that we use. Health and social care could perhaps line with us. We know that the security within health and social care is a nightmare, and they want you to share everything with them, but they will not share everything with you. But that's important, though. We need that information. We need it for coherent multi-agency planning. And if we can have a single template that everybody is using, we would enable that to happen. And then universal access. So we have a lot of parents who struggle with reading, but the format that the EHCPs come to us in isn't necessarily always something that is screen reader ready. We have Senkos who are perhaps dyslexic and struggle to get your words out, Abigail, struggle to extract the information they need from things, and they need a screen reader, or they need a accessible PDF, or they need an auditory output of that information. We need to be able to provide things in a way that everybody can access them. 2 more slides to go. I'm not going to run over time for once, I hope. Preserving what matters most to us. So there I'm kind of talking about what we can't lose if we have a single template. So we can't flatten the individuality or compromise person-centered planning. And somebody further up asked Andre a question, and they kind of touched on this. Yes, a standard template is amazing, but actually, would parents prefer something that is personalised to their child? I think there is still scope for that within a standardised template. It can be the page where the child draws out what their ideal school day looks like, and whether that's writing or whether it's a video or whether it's a picture is what they want to present it as. I don't think we have to define it that far. We can still have it person-centered. And I've put there the template must define minimum content rather than a maximum word count, because I see, certainly when we're doing reviews these days, what some local authorities are asking us to do is, oh yeah, review this section, you've got 300 words. I can't review that in 300 words, or you can fill this in on the hub, you've got 500 words and you're allowed 2 attachments. And you're thinking, I've got 7 attachments and I want to write 700 words. We can't do that. We can't say this is your maximum, this is the most you can put in there, but we can define the minimum, and clarity and flexibility can coexist alongside each other. So we need to keep that person-centered focus. We need the flexible narrative, so we're not losing that. We need that local customization, but without it becoming an entirely different template, and we need reasonable adjustments. And then my final slide just says, what do I personally think good looks like? For me, it is something that has clear outcomes, which we'd love. I'm sure those of you who are Senkos are screaming at the screen at the moment going, yes, please. We want quantified provision, absolutely defined in there. And we want review ready evidence. So an annual review that prompts impact evidence, not just an activity update and says we've done this. So I would wish for those things. And I've put right down at the bottom there, just above my purple line, I want EHCPs to be living documents, not dusty relics, because I think there is the danger at the moment with some of them that we get them, we look at them, we translate them into something else that we can work with because we understand it and we need to translate it because the current model isn't working. But then that becomes a dusty relic that sits in a cupboard for a year until we have to do the annual review again, and then we go and look at it. Actually, I want the EHCP to be the working, living document that we're using on a day-to-day basis. Thank you, Phil. Let me stop sharing.
No, thank you, Abigail. Let me just share so we go to the Q&A question. Hopefully that's now sharing. Okay.
I've got a question just popped up there. So what's my view on who should quantify the provision? Should it be an EP? I think it's the person that is most relevant to the provision. So it could be a speech and language therapist who is recommending a speech and language provision. Therefore, they should be the one who is quantifying it. It could be the education psychologist related to something that needs to happen. But I also think, and it really frustrates me, that sometimes Senkos are not recognised as the professional. We're only recognised as a professional when it's convenient. And when it's not convenient, it's like, yeah, your view doesn't count. We're not bothered what you want. We also count. So if the speech and language therapist is saying it needs to happen 5 times a week and you're like, that's a little bit too much for the student, I think it's a negotiation between them to say, actually, yeah, 5 times a week would be great, but they can't cope with that because they've got so much else going on. Can we go for 3 times a week? Will it have a similar or the same impact? So I think it does vary.
Thanks, Abigail.
You're welcome.
Fantastic to have Abigail with us today, and it's so insightful and so powerful to have the perceptions from the Senko stroke setting stroke school lens, as well as from a local authority or a professional lens, and then the parent care lens as well. And I think, Abigail, you did that beautifully and you articulated your points so well, so thanks again. Always one question come through before I will have one more question. Would delivered documents for people not be the ADPR cycle, which continues throughout the year until the review? Is your proposal that the EHP would therefore require a yearly amendment, or worry about capacity impact with LAs?
Well, can I point out that if you make an amendment to an EHCP, then it should be amended within 4 weeks of having that meeting. It's not that the local authority hasn't got the capacity for that. They are supposed to be doing it if you are making an amendment to it. So it's that, yeah, the bottom part of that question doesn't make very much sense to me. Yes, you are right, it is part of your APDR cycle, but rather than repeating the information and transferring it to another document, what I'm saying is why we're not using the EHCP document for the APDR and going through that 3 times a year and then doing the annual review that sits alongside it, and it's the 3rd review that goes to the local authority.
Thanks, Abigail. I'm just going to now share my, oh, it's gone back to the start. Let's catch up. There we go. Okay, so hopefully now you can see the Envision 360 webinar with a lady and data on the front. I can't see what, because I'm sharing full screen. Lydia, can you give me a thumbs up to say, yep, that's
you're
on.
all good. That's great.
Fantastic. Right. I am going to be brief, because the wealth of expertise in this space is with the audience. It's with you guys, the attendees. So we're going to do some interactive tasks. So you're going to, either with a device, your phone, or the tablet you're accessing this on, we're going to use something called Menti in a minute, and you'll see the responses live. It's all anonymous, but it'll be sort of ranking and scaling. But I introduced you to Envision 360 were at the start, and I was really interested in our last webinar when the audience and attendees voted heavily with their feet to say we'd love some conversation and dialogue and input regarding templates, because it does link into something we're doing here in Envision 360. And Andre and Abigail both referenced AI, and I know it's come through the questions as well. Here at Envision 360, we've been for 5 years auditing the quality of EHCPs using software, like you can see on screen. There's static images, but this is the type of way that EHCPs can be audited by local authorities using our software. And that's been successful, and we've got 60 LAs using that software nationally. But the quality and consistencies of education, health and care plans nationally continues to be a limitation, and that's recognised through Ofsted and CQC and all manner of other data and evidence. And plus, we have the data from the 60 LAs who utilise our tool. So there needs to be some work around how can we improve quality and consistency of EHPs but maintaining that personalisation and making sure that whatever's utilised or implemented complements the subject matter expertise that exists within local authorities, exists within assessment offices. And that's where we built Beta, which is a generative AI tool that is built to complement local authorities to produce higher quality plans and create more resource for co-produced meetings with families at the draft stage, more relationship building, and more time to be a reflective practitioner and analytical about the content of the EHCP, rather than manual heavy lifting and administrative components of it. We talked about copy and paste earlier. There's been lots and lots of information and publications. These three that are sharing on screen are just this month alone. As we approach the October, where we're expecting to hear more about the reforms. On the left there is the reference to the Children's Commissioner, where it talks about potentially three tiers of EHCPs in terms of education plans, education health plans, education care plans. That is one area that's been talked. Andre referenced the Education Committee have just last week put recommendations to the government. I'll touch on them in a moment. And there was within the special needs jungle a huge parental charity that have a massive reach nationally. They've done a piece recently on the artificial intelligence and its role within writing education, health and care plans from a parental perspective as well, which looked at some of the positive elements that it can bring to it. What is recognised across the sector is we want higher quality EHCPs, and we want them more consistent, whether that consistency is within a local authority or whether that's across a region or national. There has to be greater consistency. The Education Committee, I won't read it, I'll let you read the slide itself, but one of the things that has been muted is there going to be a reduction in EHCPs? Will they cease, etc.? The Education Committee was very clear in its recommendations about strengthening inclusion, but do not dilute SEND legal entitlements for families, children and young people. We all will await the reforms, but we're starting to see different messages and different pieces come out as we get closer and closer. Going back further upstream, we talked about this, the Change Partner Programme. This came through the SEND and Alternative Provision Improvement Plan in 2023. And we talked about these 32 local authorities who were part of the Change Partner Programme, who were part of the development and also piloting this national digital EHP template that was recommended and seemed to get a lot of backing in terms of across the SEND community of something as a positive next step So that's being used and utilized, and we await that. Change partner program feedback has come back to the DFE following the adoption of that pilot template, and a number of those LAs continue to use that pilot template, that EHCP template that was piloted. They continue to use it as part of their everyday practice because of some of the benefits it brought. The three areas that have been discussed. The current on the left is localized. Where we are now, 153 LAs there's 153 different EHCP templates, and we've talked about some of the challenges that creates. There are different potentials going forward. If there is no national mandate, some local authorities within their region are already engaged in discussion of talking about having a regional template. There are 9 regions. So if there's no mandate for a national template, then will they move to a regional? It's likely some regions will look for a regional best practice. Or the potential is that there will be a mandate that there is a national standardised EHCP template where every local authority is working to what is considered the best practice with a standardised EHCP template. Okay, I'm going to get some of your views here, and you'll be able to see the responses live on screen. What you need to do is you need to just type in Menti into Google Safari, into the internet. If you type in Menti and join, you'll see the top link is for voting. If you click that, it will ask you to enter a code. The code is on screen currently. So what you need to do is pop in Menti, M-E-N-T-I, into a phone, into your desktop, your laptop, hit the voting, and then the code you need is on screen, and that's 1506-8165. Lydia, could you pop that code in the chat for me as well? So 1506-8165. All your responses will be anonymous. And I'm going to pop in there. You will see the code on screen, 1506-8165. And the first question is, I was aware of the National Change Partner Program in the SEND sector and that a national EHCP template was being piloted. Just indicate whether you were fully aware, you had some awareness, or you were unaware. It's just good to know from the community in the sector where people's awareness was on that. I can see now lots of people have managed to get into Menti. Well done. If you just pop a vote in for this one, we've got a few slides. You should be able to see the responses coming live. Lydia, you're going to give me a yes to say that Menti's on screen and is moving with the numbers of votes. Awesome. Okay. We can see there is a split across, the majority aware, some with limited awareness. Okay. We will send the outcome of all of these Menti slides with the slide deck as well, so you will get these. Okay, the next one, and you got 5 options from strongly disagree all the way to strongly agree. It might be you put the same response for all 3, that's fine. You might think all 3 in an effective way. You might think one is, one isn't, 2 are, 2 aren't. You just have to, for each of those, rank your perceptions from strongly disagree, unsure, agree, strongly agree, whether you feel. It'd be good to get some sort of ranking where we feel some of these templates, so the type of template exists. Okay, national template is strong, on average about a 5, 5 being strongly agree. We're currently at 4.8. If that's not mandated, you can see here that there is some appetite for a regional EHCP template. So within your region, having local authorities use the same EHCP template. Admittedly, there would still be 9 different templates across the entire country. That's fantastic. That's really interesting. It's clear as well, right? The direction of travel here and what the appetite is. It is for greater consistency, and I think that slide that indicates well. Right, before I hit the next slide will go similar, but you get 100 points to use here, and you distribute your 100 points. They're like tokens across 4 responses. You can put 100 on one if you're so strongly for that one. You could say if you're split across all 4, it could be 25 to each. But indicate your perceptions / preferences by distributing your 100 points, your votes, across any combination of the responses. You could put 70 on one, 10, 10, 10 on the other, 50 on one, 50 on another, 0, 0 on the other. It's essentially what you think the response would be. Hopefully this exercise is useful for you guys as well, because you're seeing across 50 attendees here what the views are, and what I've seen up until this point is consistent. There's a consistent desire or motivational drive to get this right. And I think everybody who works in SEND, whether it's about EHCP templates or any aspect of SEND, there is such a drive. It's such a vocational sort of sector. There is such a drive and passion to get things right. It's about having the resource to do it, having the mandate to do it, the legislation to do it, and the room to do it, capacity. Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, 2 statements here. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. I perceive a standardized template for the professional advice. These are the EP advices, the OT advices, the SALT advices, the pediatrician advices. So all of the professional advice that inform an EHCP, having a standardized template across LAs would be a positive and purposeful initiative. And the second question is, in the interim, before any formal mandation for this, would it be positive to have access to best practice examples? Fantastic. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to stop here and come back to my slides. I'm going to go through these. So we talked about Vita briefly, and I'm not going to spend a long time on it. This isn't what today's about. It's about sharing knowledge, but it's important that we create awareness of what's out there, because Vita isn't the only generative AI tool that's out there to support higher quality HCPs. We piloted this, and we've had 20 LAs help shape this, and we've worked with groups of SENCOs, groups of educational psychologists. Importantly, we've worked with lots of parent care forums. We've worked with lots of children and young people, and we believe that AI working to complement the professionals, the subject matter experts, is the way to go. And we've produced this model, this platform. In there, we put best practice. After working with 60 local authorities, after reviewing the national EHCP template, after looking at all the change partner program feedback, we put together what we believe is a best practice EHCP template. It aligns very closely to what was the nationally piloted template and all the learning from that. And that's available through Vita for local authorities to aspire to best practice. And our vision is that all children within EHCP have a high quality plan that accurately reflects their individual needs and facilitates the achievement of positive life outcomes. And that is what we're working to. And you can see there some of our EHCPs are not just documents, they're lifelines, especially for those who are too often overlooked. And when used with care, technology becomes more than a tool. It becomes a voice for children who are struggle to be heard. And we're very, very strong in terms of our vision and our passion within the organization to improve the quality of EHCPs. This has been our mission for the last 5 years. At this point, I'm going to stop. I think rather than talk about this, I can see that we've got close to 4:20. If there are any questions in the chat, then please do fire them out. If not, we do have a questionnaire survey that Lydia will drop in a moment. And what that does is, so earlier on, when you saw the feedback graph about what to do for the next webinars, what you want to hear about, what input you want, that question, that all of that input comes from a very simple survey like this that Lydia will drop in the chat. You can just rank today's different aspects of today's session, so we can keep planning these webinars that actually meet your needs. Okay, questions. Rachel, if AI is used to create HPs, would you foresee losses of jobs within local authority SEND case-off teams? No, we wouldn't. So currently demand outstrips capacity significantly. You probably hear that SEND budgets are in deficit nationally to the tune of hundreds of millions of pounds. There's not enough capacity in local authorities. What we see is initially with more more time spent on that reflective practitioner rather than administrative sort of manual lifting. We would see then there would be time to get rid of backlogs, capacity regarding annual reviews, but most importantly, around co-produced meetings with children and families. So at that draft EHCP phase, that's where case officers want to be. That's where assessment officers want to be, with the family, understanding their nuance, their bespoke individual needs, but they do not have the capacity to do that. Technology, tools like Vita, will allow and support that approach. Has there been comparison testing between AI EHCPs and human written EHCPs? Yes, Sophie, there absolutely has. This has been over close to 18 months in the making. We've been piloting with LAs. So what LAs have done, and with in connection with their parent care forums, is that they have got plans that are out in the community. They've written the plans. They may have taken between half a day and a day to write. They've used the same assessment advice that informed those plans and put them into the AI model, Vita, and compared the quality of what Vita produced compared to what was manually produced. The content being higher, but the resource taken a fraction. Not only that, they are getting immediate quality feedback on the content. So not only is he producing a draft EHCP, and I use the word draft strongly because then you have the co-produced meet with the family, but it's also giving quality feedback, i.e. this provision isn't specified. This provision from this service, it's not clear who should deliver it, what level of expertise. They're getting that immediate feedback so they can focus on that reflective piece. So yes. What's next for Vita? Pilot finish? Yes, we're already presenting to local authorities. We have a large number of local authorities who are now following pilot or accessing to trial it, run their data through, work with their parent care community, their school communities to look at can it improve in their local authority, knowing their local authority best. So it is live, very recently live, and lots of conversations with local authorities currently happening. Okay, I'm just making sure I miss it. More face-to-face working, absolutely. We want, I think when people go into SEND, I know me personally, when I went into SEND many years ago, you go in with an absolute desire, a passion, a motivation to improve the lives of vulnerable children and young people. Like many other roles, I think Abigail will, I'm sure, would agree with Senko's, the ability to do your job is often hamstrung by the demands of the role, and some of those demands are administrative, they're not enjoyable, and they can be done better by technology, not the subject matter expertise. Absolutely not. What we're talking about is those roles, that technology that we're all using and we're all improving, but that's what we want. We want the job to go back to what it's been, making a difference to young people's lives and their families, having time with that family, understanding that family, and making sure what's in that plan is accurate, is personalized, is reviewed. These are things that capacity, it's never about motivation. When local authorities, when there's delays in timeframes, whether annual reviews, HPs, it's nothing to do about desire, motivation, or passion. We work with local authorities every single day. It's there in abundance. It's the resource. It's being able to do it. So yes, absolutely, we feel this is a game changer, if I'm being completely honest. I've worked in this sector for over 20 years, and I've never been more excited about what I'm seeing now and the expertise that sits behind it. Lydia, have you dropped the link to the feedback doc in the chat?
I shall do that now.
So it brings me at this point to close today and to say we would absolutely, if you could take less than 2 minutes to complete the survey link that Lydia's popped in, it will inform the next webinar. We continue and a commitment to provide these free of charge and encourage to have as many people here with knowledge sharing as much as possible. Any feedback you've got, we promise we will read, process, reflect on, and we will utilize it to inform our future sessions. A massive thank you to Andre and Abigail, who were able to articulate and impart their expertise so beautifully today, and it was really powerful. Another fantastic webinar. My last thank you goes to Lydia. Please put your camera on, Lydia, who is the driving force behind these webinars, and they do not happen without her. Her coordination and her drive to get these right is fantastic. So Lydia, a massive thank you from me, from our speakers, and from the wider audience. Have a fantastic evening and a really positive and purposeful week, everybody. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much for coming, everybody.